So I wanted to talk a little bit about why I went to Deer Park, and that was to hear teachings. And Deer Park is in Wisconsin, by the way, and it's the vision of Geshe Sopa for having the Dharma teachings flourish. And so the teachings that we had were on the insight section of the middle length Lam Rim. And on the very last day, Jangje Churje Rinpoche said something that I actually realize now in looking at my notes that he said it kind of on the first day, but much more clearly on the very last day, that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote this text for more people like us. What he was saying is that the great treatise on the Lam Rim, the very long one, was for people with very extensive backgrounds. And that this text was more for people like us who didn't have such extensive backgrounds, and also was much more geared towards practitioners. And I was thinking about that in terms of the whole scope of the teachings, like how they were laid out in the text and how they were taught. And I think this is actually common, but for me it was quite useful in that so the teachings are on insight, so they're quite difficult teachings. And when we got to a section where I really couldn't understand anything at all, I turned to the outline that somebody had sent us, which was quite detailed. And I realized these were like cliff notes, and I wrote them in and I inserted them in the text everywhere where they went. And it helped me to then go back and review. So I felt like first there were these, even when they were teaching, in their Tibetan text, the outline was inserted in. So they were first explaining that, which I never kind of got this till 3/4 of the way through the course. They were explaining the outline, then they were explaining the remarks, that the bulk of the text, and then they were going to the source text and explaining the source text on the material. Is that clear? So they explain, there might be one point that they're explaining. First they would explain it from the outline, then they would explain it from how the text itself was written, and then they would explain it from where that came from, the earlier great masters, the source text. So what happened with most of the points that we went over, they'd go over them 3 times. And sometimes, and usually what happened is then the next morning, he would review the parts from the day before, especially the parts where we all got completely confused, including the translator. And, he'd make it, and then when he taught in his own words, it was actually almost easier sometimes. He could put these things in his own words, which he did during the teachings, but he also would make a point of doing that the next day. And so what I found from that process, because it was over and over and over, is that many things got said repeatedly, and I felt for this material that was quite helpful. And then in particular, I felt like there were some benefits to my practice, and I think that partly came from realizing that in one point in the text, because all of these teachings are meant for our practice, right, for our cultivation. And then when you find your little problem in there, and and you recognize, oh, this is where I'm going wrong right now in my practice. I felt like he had laid it out. It's like the whole roadmap is there. And so that's what I really appreciate, and what I really saw in these teachings, both in that little incident of seeing, oh, this is where I'm having a problem in my practice, and they're writing about this because this is what happens and here's what you do kind of thing. But then in general, the whole teaching was clear to me from this set of teachings was how well laid out the path is into such a level of detail, but with such refinement and clarity until we got to the Buddha's mind. Then it was feeling a little inconceivable. I mean, that was a little hard to kind of understand, but it was really, so in terms of the teachings, they were very well taught from a very great text, and so it was a really wonderful opportunity in that way, and I think that in terms of the vision of this center, I think they're quite fulfilling what their vision is in this regard. So that's a little taste of what we did.